The heavy, rhythmic thud of imperial boots strikes the scorched earth of the North China Plain, but the man they march for does not hear them. It is the summer of 210 BCE, and the Shakyu terrace is smothered in an oppressive, breathless heat. Amidst the shimmering dust of the procession, a singular, elaborate carriage remains tightly shuttered, its silk curtains unmoving. Surrounding it, the air is thick with the persistent, maddening hum of swarming flies, drawn by a cloying, nauseating stench that even the relentless sun cannot bake away. To mask this rot, crates of pungent, salted fish have been lashed to the following wagons, their brine mixing with the smell of decay to create a suffocating veil of salt and death. Inside that silent carriage, the unifier of the warring states, the man who claimed the mandate of heaven and sought the secret of eternal life, lies as a cooling, blackened corpse. The first emperor of Qin is dead, yet the empire does not know it. In the flickering shadows of a nearby tent, a eunuch and a prime minister are currently hunched over a blank scroll, preparing to commit a crime that will shatter the foundations of the world's most powerful state. Welcome back to the History Atlas. Today, we peel back the layers of the Sand Hill Coup, a conspiracy born of salted fish and forged silk that turned a quest for immortality into a funeral pyre for a dynasty. To understand the tragedy at Sand Hill, one must look into the eyes of a man who believed he could conquer time itself. By 210 BCE, Qin Shi Huang had achieved the impossible. He had forged a single nation from the blood-soaked chaos of the warring states, standardized the very script of human thought, and raised a great wall to defy the northern wastes. Yet, as his earthly power reached its zenith, a cold, existential terror took hold. The emperor became obsessed with legalism, a philosophy of absolute control. But he could not control the ticking of his own heart. He turned to the mystic arts, dispatching massive expeditions into the eastern seas to find the mythical island of Penglai and the elixir of life. In his final years, his palaces became a labyrinth of secrecy. He moved through hidden tunnels, convinced that staying out of the sight of spirits would grant him longevity. But the true poison was already inside him. On the advice of court alchemists, the emperor consumed immortality pills laced with heavy concentrations of mercury. Instead of eternal life, he found a slow, metallic madness. The bitter taste of the mercury elixirs became a constant companion, eroding his organs and his mind as he embarked on one final, desperate tour of his eastern provinces. He was a man racing toward the horizon, unaware that his frantic search for a beginning was leading him straight to a gruesome end. As the emperor's pulse slowed to a stop in the sweltering heat of Shakyu, the mandate of heaven hung in the balance, waiting for someone bold enough, or treacherous enough, to seize it. In the suffocating silence of the Shakyu terrace, the power of the empire did not lie in the dead hands of the emperor, but in the hands of two men terrified of the future. Zhao Gao, the influential eunuch and master of the imperial chariots, saw in the emperor's death a singular opportunity to escape his station. He knew that if the eldest son, the upright Prince Fusu, ascended the throne, his own influence would vanish. To succeed, he needed a partner in crime, and he found one in the Prime Minister, Li Si. Despite being a brilliant architect of the Qin state, Li Si was a man paralyzed by the fear of losing his position. He understood that Fusu favored more moderate advisors, which would likely lead to his own dismissal or execution. In the flickering, low light of the command tent, Zhao Gao played upon this insecurity, weaving a web of intrigue that transformed the prime minister from a servant of the law into a traitor to the crown. Together, they looked toward the emperor's youngest and most impressionable son, Hu Hai, as a puppet through whom they could rule. The only thing standing in their way was a final decree the emperor had dictated on his deathbed, intended for Fusu. With cold, calculated precision, they suppressed the true document. The air in the tent grew heavy with the scratch of a brush on silk as Li Si began to forge a new decree. The sound of a dynasty's death warrant being signed in secret. To succeed, they had to eliminate the only man who could stop them, the emperor's eldest son and his most loyal general. Hundreds of miles to the north, at the edge of civilization, the air was not thick with the stench of fish, but with the biting wind of the Ordos Desert. Here, Prince Fusu and General Meng Tian stood watch over the empire's northern frontier, commanding a battle-hardened host of 300,000 troops and the massive fortifications of the Great Wall. They were the shield of Qin, representing the very Bud, stability the conspirators in Shakyu sought to dismantle. When the imperial messenger arrived, he carried a scroll sealed with the unmistakable mark of the emperor.
So begins the end.
A document born of the treacherous court officials and their forged silk.
Sealed in wax.
The letter was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. It accused the prince of filial impiety and the general of military failure, ending with the ultimate command of the legalist state. Suicide. General Meng Tian, a veteran of 1,000 campaigns, sensed the trap immediately. He urged the prince to verify the order, noting that an emperor does not discard his finest shield without cause. But Fusu, a man of profound loyalty and righteousness, could not bring himself to doubt a father he had spent his life trying to please. He looked out over the gray expanse of the wall he had helped defend, feeling the cold weight of the sword in his hand as he prepared to obey a father who, unknown to him, was already a rotting corpse in a salt-caked carriage. With a single, tragic stroke, the rightful heir fell. With the rightful heir gone, the conspirators returned to the capital, but they brought a monster back with them to sit on the throne. When the imperial procession finally reached the capital of Xianyang, the transition of power was as silent as it was lethal. Hu Hai was crowned as Qin Heir Shi, but the crown was merely a gilded cage. He was a man of shallow ambition and deep insecurity, a perfect vessel for Zhao Gao's dark designs. Under the eunuch's poisonous guidance, the new emperor did not look outward to govern, but inward to purge. The palace, once the center of a unified world, transformed into a slaughterhouse. To ensure no rival could ever challenge the forged legitimacy of his rule, Hu Hai launched a systematic extermination of his own bloodline. 10 princes were dismembered in the marketplace of Xianyang, and 10 princesses were executed with such cold efficiency that the court fell into a state of paralyzed terror. The fate and fortune of an era was now being dictated by a man who saw the empire as a personal playground and a eunuch who saw it as a ledger of debts to be settled. The screams echoing through the palace corridors during those months marked the true end of the Qin peace, as the blood of the first emperor's children stained the very stones he had laid for a 10,000-year reign. Zhao Gao's grip on the young emperor was absolute, but a single test of loyalty would soon reveal just how delusional the court had become. By the second year of the new reign, the line between authority and madness had vanished entirely. To cement his position, Zhao Gao orchestrated a psychological trap that remains a chilling case study in the destruction of truth. In front of the assembled court, the eunuch presented the young emperor with a deer, but with a straight face, he declared it to be a magnificent horse. When the confused Huhai laughed, believing his minister was joking, Zhao Gao remained stone-faced and turned to the high officials, asking them to identify the animal. This was the moment that would break the administration. Some officials, sensing the trap, remained silent. Others, hoping to please the rising power, loudly praised the horse's fine coat and powerful hooves. But those few who stood by the evidence of their own eyes and called it a deer were immediately marked for death. The terrified silence in the throne room as these honest men were led away to the executioner's blade was the final nail in the coffin of the Qin state. Justice was no longer a matter of law, but of survival through deception. This calling a deer a horse incident was not just a display of ego. It was a deliberate purging of the competent and the truthful, leaving behind a court of shadows and sycophants. While the court argued over animals, the common people, pushed to the brink by labor and taxes, were picking up farm tools and turning them into weapons. While the halls of Xianyang were choked with lies, the reality of the Qin's brutal legalism was being felt on the muddy roads of the Daxiang district. In the summer of 209 BCE, a group of 900 impoverished laborers was being marched toward the northern frontier to serve as garrison guards. Their mission was simple: arrive on time or face the consequences. However, a sudden, torrential rainstorm turned the landscape into a swamp, washing out roads and making further progress impossible. Under the unyielding laws of the first emperor, the penalty for arriving late for state service, regardless of the cause, was death. The sound of torrential rain turning the roads to mud was not just a weather event. It was the sound of a system's internal logic collapsing. Realizing that they were dead men, whether they marched or stayed, the laborers chose the human tides of rebellion. They declared that since the empire had abandoned reason, the people would abandon the empire. This spark acted as a signal fire for a population pushed to the breaking point by the Sand Hill conspirators' increased taxes and forced labor. The Qin army, once an unstoppable machine that had crushed 6 kingdoms, was now fighting a ghost. The ghost of the stability and purpose the first emperor had spent his life building. The calamity that brings death to the Qin was not found on the battlefield, but in the final, desperate gasps of the Sand Hill conspiracy. As the empire burned, the unholy alliance between Zhao Gao and Li Si dissolved into a frantic struggle for survival. Li Si, the brilliant legalist who had bartered his honor for his position, found that in a world without truth, there is no loyalty. He was eventually framed by Zhao Gao, tortured, and executed in the marketplace along with his entire family. Shortly after, The eunuch forced the young Emperor Huai to take his own life as the rebel armies closed in on the capital. The smoke of the burning Xianyang Palace, rising into the sky, became the funeral pyre of the Qin, a dynasty that was meant to last 10,000 years, but fell in just 15. The Sand Hill Coup remains one of history's most profound warnings. That a state built on the absolute suppression of the people cannot survive the rot of its own leadership. While the Qin were replaced by the Han Dynasty, which would rule for 4 centuries, the shadow of Shakyu never truly vanished. It redefined the mandate of heaven, proving that an empire's strength lies not in its walls or its secret decrees, but in the integrity of its succession and the trust of its people. If you want to understand why empires fall from within, please subscribe to our channel to relive heroic chapters of history with us.